but this is kind of continuation of what we started last week with Ted talking about his life and all the various memories that were seen as things that influenced his interests as an artist and his direction as an artist, including meeting Gladys and marrying Gladys. And so the good news is if you missed that talk, we have it all taped, videoed. So we will, I think, you can download it from the website now, Phyllis? Okay. So you can download it from the Grace and Peace website and have a nice little 45 visit with Ted all by yourself.
Where'd you put it, Phyllis? Where's it on?
It's in your video.
Okay, so apparently there's a category videos, and that's where you go. So this is something new for Grace and Peace. We have, I would say, a minority that are very techy, and the rest of us are trying to catch up. So that will be a wonderful way to kind of supplement what we're going to talk about today. Ted said that he wants to talk about his time teaching and working with students today. We will conclude that with a little bit of time for you to ask questions in the event that you have questions about other things in the exhibition and weren't here last week to hear any of that discussed. We don't have quite the crunch of getting out of here at 10:15 like we did last week, so we can tarry a bit more. I apologize for any of you that I kind of shoved out of the room, but there was a wedding reception waiting to set up. So
I really would like questions, about particular pieces.
yeah. So, and Ted, we don't have samples in the exhibition, but for those of you that weren't here last week, Ted did illustrated two children's books. And we have found copies on Amazon, and they will be for sale as part of the holiday sale, which is the next exhibition, which will start, I think it's November 12th, with an opening event that evening. And that holiday exhibition, or Christmas exhibition, as I was admonished last week, is to encourage people to consider buying art as a gift, to buy something that's unique or personally made. Artist or craftsperson. So that show will start mid-November, and that'll give you about 4 weeks to consider your shopping list and who you could buy art for. So, and these books will be a part of that as well. I have about 4 or 5 of each. And then there's the print, which has been done from Ted's drawing, and the drawing is hanging in the hallway out there. This is what's referred to as a Jacqueline print. It is a very high reproduction photograph transferred on high quality paper of the original artwork. So very nice way to take a unique work and turn it into something that many, many people can own. At this point it's a small edition. At this point I think we've only done about 20 prints. And if Ted wants, we can close it at 20 prints and destroy the original, not the original art, but the original reproduction. I couldn't do that. My husband owns the original art. That would put me in a really bad place. But it makes a lovely gift, all symbols of our faith, rendered by Ted's own hand, and there's a framed version in the hallway. So enough of announcements. Ted, tell us what it's like to teach.
Okay. I'll get to that.
Okay.
The material that's displayed on that table over there is my student work from a course in two-dimensional design and graphic design.
Now, it's not your work as a student, but it's the work of your students.
My students,
okay.
yes.
You need to clarify there.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should talk about the charcoal pieces first.
Okay, wonderful.
The one on the right is called El Presidente. He was the president of San Salvador, or El Salvador. I kind of forgot. El, okay. And of course he and his country had to tolerate ongoing battle with leftist people, and they were pretty brutal folks. But anyway, he was very courageous and went into the jungle and met with them and extended his hand of peace. And I think it may have held for a while. And so I guess I wanted to just acknowledge that a person, human being who would be so courageous. And so that's what that's about. The one behind the gentleman here is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Most of you probably know that he was involved in a plot to get rid of Hitler, kill him. And that was found out, and so he was arrested and finally was executed. This one is a poet, John Berryman, who I think was popular maybe, I would say popular, maybe about 20 years ago. John Berryman was hard to read. He was a conflicted human being. He acknowledged, at least I was reading some of his autobiography, and he acknowledged that the breakup with his wife was his own fault. That he treated her unfairly. And the other thing about that one, I wanted to refine the technique a little bit. And so I think you can see the difference. This is more quickly done. This is more meticulously done. Okay? Then the ones over here, one on the left is Conrad Aiken, and it's a quote from his book, which is simply titled Thee. And the text there is, body ages and mind ages with it. Where shall I abide, cries the Spirit. I think he may have killed himself as well. The next one is Gladys on Madeline Island. So we were up there 2 or 3 times, and it was just a perfect place for a vacation with kids. I think I mentioned the other time about we arrived in our VW van, unpacked, got all set up, and a bus drove in to the little parking lot behind where we were. And 35 girls piled out. They were, brownies and Girl Scouts? And my boy said, "Oh, no."
Right. That's true. All that ruins it.
Yeah, but fortunately, the next morning they were gone.
Oh, okay.
So, all right, the next one is Walker Percy, one of my favorite authors. And if you've never read him, the place to start is a book called The Moviegoer. And the next piece seems to have fallen again.
No, that one it was the other one that fell before.
Oh, was it?
So.
Okay. They're taking
One of the, let me explain. One of the difficulties in presenting graphic works like this, that at this point in Ted's life are the only edition left. They're the only piece left of that. And so we didn't want to permanently mount anything. So everything is put up either with photo corners or temporary sticking tape. Well, the climate in this room doesn't like temporary sticking tape. So those keep falling inside their little boxes. So they're protected, but so I'm sorry, go ahead, Ted.
Okay. Oh, I'll talk a little bit about the large panels
Okay, wonderful.
out on the hallway. The strong, vibrant colored one, maybe you can see it, PZ, from there. the David Star of David, I guess it's called, and the cross. I'm simply trying to depict the relationship of the, you could, for simplicity, say the Old and New Testament.
Yes, yes.
The tan panel that's on the other side that you walk by with chalice, bread, and fish was just simply symbolize the Lord's Supper. And I guess I purposely did something that was not vibrant. It was more subdued. And but I brought the elements out, and there were lights
Right.
behind. So,
Yeah, it's a relief image, so
yeah.
the chalice and the bread and so forth are all raised off the surface of the panel about an inch or so, and then he filled the space behind those with some carefully placed Christmas lights, so that each of those objects glows, so to speak. But it's been a long time since those Christmas lights have worked. So, like Christmas tree lights,
Okay.
when one goes, the whole line goes. So,
The black and white and yellow that's down the hall a little further on the left was done for Pentecost Sunday. And just by the way, installing these things for the longest time was really difficult. We had to haul this aluminum but heavy ladder out from behind the organ. It would take two people to set it up, and we'd climb up there and attach the thing. Well, I finally tumbled to the fact that I could set up pulleys
right.
and not have to use the ladder.
Right, and the
At
pulley
all.
system works very nicely.
Yeah, it does. Okay. Oh, yeah. The one that's at the end of the hall, I don't know that there was a specific day for that I was celebrating. I think it was just more, I guess you'd say a celebration, in a sense, of the city. And who was the little, what was his name? Emil, yeah, Emil Itzy. Came up to me and talked about it a little bit, and I said, "Well, what do you think? What would you call it?"
Mm-hmm.
And with great authority, he said, "Christ in the City." You know? So, and then he was gone to play with the raucous activity that usually goes on after church. So, okay. All right, now, if you've heard this before, please bear with us. But I've got to tell those who haven't heard about how I met Gladys. All right, we were still at the same school. We were at the same school. It was the early 50s. And at Bob Jones, there's not much, what should I say? Well, there's certainly no physical connection with another person. However, during the artist series, as they call it, where there was opera, Hal Holbrook read there, the Mark Twain thing, and Buckley, William F. Buckley was there. Anyway, you could date for those, and so there was probably a little bit of scrunching and bumping and so on going on there. In any case, in front of the Student Center, at the Student Center there was a lecture hall, post office, snack shop, and I think that was it altogether. Anyway, but the walk that went in front of it led to the library. So one evening I was just up there hanging out with the guys and sort of postponing study. And this lovely woman walked by, and she looked kind of arrogant. She was holding her head very high, and she had an armload of books, and I took notice of her. And I suppose a few days later, I was in one of the buildings there that housed the art department, and it had plenty of display space, and Gladys was out there hanging an exhibit of this wonderful stuff. And the guy was both a painter and would you give me some water, please? Oh, thank you. He was both a painter and a designer. And the fact that he could live in both those worlds very, very much interested me. So anyway, yeah, I forgot to mention that there was that parade to the library, but after dinner, there was usually a parade of couples moving down this long, curving sidewalk, and that was called the snail trail. Because, of course, people were not anxious to get to the bottom of the sidewalk and say goodbye to the girl. And so we did that a few times, I guess. I'll cut to the holiday when we came home for Christmas and so forth. Gladys stayed in St. Louis a couple of days before she went to her home in Kansas City. And so, I don't know where you stayed.
At your parents' house.
At my parents' house, okay. In any case, we wanted to see the art museum. And years ago, there was a little room just off the main hall, which had a really almost medieval stairway. Do you remember that, Peasy? And in the middle of the floor was this bubbly little fountain. It was just a wonderful little room. And now I was hallucinating, or I'm right, and they've done something else with the picture. But I remembered it as El Greco's resurrection hanging on the wall. Now, I asked the other night, where is it?
Yeah.
And the lady said, we don't have that listed.
Oh,
And there's no real history of it. You'd have to go elsewhere in the building to find that out. But we have St. Paul by El Greco.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I thought it was it was the resurrection. Okay, so anyway, it was December, but it was pleasant. And so this was such, for me, and I presume Gladys, I know for Gladys, it was just kind of mystical. The sun was setting and the light was coming in, and here's this gorgeous setting. And I said, I think we should go outside. So we did, and because it was warm, we sat on the grass on Art Hill. And as they say, the rest is history. Yeah, I asked her if she would marry me, and she said yes. So that's a highlight of my life. All right. Okay, the one behind you used to hang in our storefront church at Kingsbury and De Pere. And it was, I found this old crate, side of a crate, shipping crate, and decided that I could do something with And so, you see what I did. I depicted the dove of the Holy Spirit, representing the Holy Spirit, and then the prayer at the bottom.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
I've always pondered, we're all familiar with the symbol of the dove, but talk to me about your choice to make it a red dove.
I think that was more an aesthetic choice,
Okay,
rather than depicting
okay,
realistic. Yeah.
yeah.
I thought it, well, in that it was centered, I thought it needed something pretty strong. So. Okay, well, we can look at some of the things down here. I certainly enjoy reading, and this panel has a number of poems and strong quotations. This is, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's a good one. To neither glorify God nor give Him thanks is the ultimate affront. It's the rejection of the reality of God the giver. It is the denial of what is most basic and fundamental, that we are creatures in a creation that is full of good gifts that make life possible and full of challenging possibilities. That was by a fellow named Luke Timothy Johnson. And he was a monk in his early years, but at some point realized that was not for him. He wanted to be in a more, he taught from one of the big universities in the South. Okay, and here's another interesting one by a student of C.S. Lewis, Don B. Griffiths. He and C.S. Lewis corresponded for years after he had moved on. But in any case, it was on the subject of contemplation. Contemplation is a habit of mind which enables the soul to keep in a state of recollection in the presence of God, whatever may be the work with which we are occupied. In this sense, it's the true aim of every Christian life. I'll not read them all. Here's one that I have to read. This is by a Japanese poet named Issa. A good world it is indeed, where the beetle rings his little bell and the kite pirouettes. I love it. Okay, well, perhaps you can read some of these.
Talk a minute, Ted, about your process of designing the image that you incorporate then with the text.
Okay. Well, in some cases, this is a spiral, what's a seashell that spirals?
The Nautilus. The Nautilus.
The what?
Nautilus.
Yes, that's what it is. Thank you. And that seemed appropriate to me because, if that geometry was extended, it would go to infinity. And the same with its regress. It would go to, if the same curve was maintained, it would go to infinity. So that's why I used that. This is a very powerful poem by, I don't know where he stands spiritually or even if he's still alive. Mark Strand is his name. And I do want you to read this one. This really is powerful for maybe not even a non-believer. He's just questioning where will we be when it ends. This is by a Polish poet named Czesław Miłosz. And this again is, he's not the easiest poet to deal with. This one's pretty clear. But in any case, what I did was just to work on an abstraction, to kind of what I thought was appropriate for the piece.
Were these standalone projects, or were they part of a church bulletin or a book project?
They were just for my own.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, here's another guy that I really like, named Ted Kruser. He was the poet laureate for some time. I got away. But anyway, this one has a definitely different tone. Oh man, I need to.
Water?
Thank you. Garage sale. All your husband, oh, by the way, he's from the upper Midwest, I forgot the state, but anyway. All your husband's shirts and slacks and heavy sweaters, a bank of threatening clouds that hang from a pipe between two ladders are much too big for me, and his extra boots look cold and deep as abandoned wells, and his tools are no good to anyone but him. The head of the hammer is loose from pounding, and he has twisted his screwdriver out of its handle and burned through the cord of his soldering iron and chipped up the blade of his crosscut saw and all the fingers he touches with you. Where can he be while I chat with you about the rain beginning to ring the fenders of trikes and bikes parked in ranks on the drive? Where is he as you and I carry the baby clothes back under your roof and the rain wets the down on your freckled, elbowy arms and shines on your face and small, round, hopeful shoulders? I walk so empty-handed to my car. Highly recommend this guy. He's very, very, very good and very approachable. It's not baffling like some modern poetry is.
Well, he's still active in writing, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
was here in St. Louis maybe 2 years ago
Yeah.
for a special event out at Maryville, I think, Maryville University.
Yeah.
So,
Every morning he takes a walk, and that might be a half mile, might be a mile. He just observes what's different today from yesterday. And often he comes back and sits down and writes a poem.
If poetry is kind of something that's foreign to you, he's a wonderful place to start. His writing is very accessible, but very observant, very contemplative.
Yeah.
He's a great poet.
Okay. I'll just mention now the material on the table over there. You can look at it later. Was my students' work. I gave assignments, they responded. So I think you'll find some interesting things in there. All right. Let's see. These three, 1, 2, 3, were projected banner panels, and I hope to complete them. I hope to do it one of these days. We'll see. Somewhere along the line, I was confronted with what's called the golden rectangle. It's simply a proportion of length by width that is very pleasing to the eye, and you find it echoed in such places as the Greek temples and sculpture. Not exactly, but it's there. In natural forms, the pine cone and so forth. have the mathematics of the Golden Square. What's it called? Fibonacci series?
Yes, right.
Okay, so anyway, that was just a packet that I did to inspire the students. Okay. The little bear there waving his toothbrush, that was a sample I submitted to an author who had asked me to do a book. It was called Hare and Bear. And do we have Hare and Bear? No, we don't. Okay. Anyway, that did it. She went along with my...
So I need to look for that one too. Okay,
Okay. The next one here.
it's like a treasure hunt.
This was the original. The kid skating through the air with a Groucho nose because he's buried in a book. And this was done for the side of a bookmobile. And it was to say, a book can help you see where you're going. And it was flatly rejected. So,
What happens?
yeah. All right. These, I think, were just playful experiments. It was, it was early on with computers. And so I said, wow, look at all the stuff you could do. And so I would use that then to inspire the students to really push it, see what all they can do. This one, I guess I was thinking about movie credits when you have imagery at type, and decided that that would be appropriate. Okay.
So a lot of this really is either for, so to speak, your role as a liturgical artist or to inspire your students,
Yeah.
to give examples.
Yeah.
So you weren't able to find examples, satisfactory examples in what was already being produced out there, or at least nothing that you felt that was really challenging.
I wanted to show myself.
Oh, okay. I just remember when I was an art student and I took my first commercial design class, we kept all these files of clippings and stuff to inspire us and direct us with illustration, various, that we'd steal little ideas off of this and that.
Yeah, I did that too.
And I imagine after a number of years that becomes a huge weight because you're always clipping and saving. And then you actually have learned enough that you stop going back to those files for ideas.
A name pops into my mind, an illustrator that I only saw a few things. His name was John Wolfgang Beck.
Mm-hmm.
And his drawings were just so wonderful. I don't even know how to explain it.
Yeah.
Pen line, not super realistic, but you got the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have files of a number of artists who illustrated.
And that's the kind of
Designers.
illustrators. It's a much more difficult market for illustrators now because there's so many computer programs that can take a photograph and render it to look like an illustration. And it, in some ways, can be cheaper for the publisher to go in that direction. So they opt for that rather than a unique work of art done by a trained illustrator. So it's kind of a sad loss in the world of technology that very often if you pick up a book or a magazine that has illustrations in it, there's at least a 50% chance that they have not been hand-drawn, designed, rendered, that they've been taken from a photograph and run through a computer program that made them look like a drawing or made them look like an impressionist painting and so forth and so on. So it's kind of highway robbery, I guess. Yeah, so frustrating for illustrators for sure.
Yeah.
I know a number of them that no longer are illustrators because they can't find work.
Okay. I think I've touched just about everything. Yeah. Why don't you all have a look at the students' work and maybe I'll be over there to
Yeah.
explain
Let me bring your water.
what's going on.
This is where you get to get up and move. Come in close, okay? Come in close. Yes, some of it is very minute detail, and if you're not within 24 inches of it, you're not going to really be able to appreciate it. So we will not let you hurt anything, I promise. So,
This assignment was sort of related to photography in that I asked for sort of a long shot, something closer, and then an extreme close-up. And you have to work to see the image in this one, but it's there. All right, this was, I thought, a delightful result from the assignment. The problem was to create either, or depict a realistic landscape or one that you could create yourself. And so there are 4 here. This one tends to be pretty realistic. This one is a close-up of foliage, sand, stone, but they're stylized stone in the water. And this one, I couldn't begin to tell you just what she had in mind, but it's beautifully done, very clean. It reminds me of, was it C.S. Lewis that
Paralandra.
Paralandra, where they picked the fruit?
Yeah, right. We were just kind of whispering that to each other over here.
Okay. And this I just love. I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know how to explain it or, tell you anything about it. I just think it's wonderful. She's Chinese and a very inventive young lady. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, this young man was Chinese also, and it was part of this assignment, but I only have two of the panels. And he was probably the most precise of anybody that I've ever had. And so this is done with pen and ink and brush, and nice little dots in there to give textures. Yep. All right. And these, back in the 60s, 70s, early 80s, not everybody, but designers were often called upon to do logos. And so I wanted to give the kids an experience that would be at least related to that. And so we decided not to make it too complicated, but to simply either reverse one letter through another or combine a few on a black background. And I guess this is the goofiest.
But as logos go, Ted, it's very memorable.
Yeah.
Okay? Depends on what your client's looking for.
Yeah,
Making logos is not easy, actually, because you have to satisfy your client.
yeah.
Yeah, and what you think is your best work, they may not be the least bit interested in.
True. Yeah. Okay, well, if you all have any questions, I'd be glad to
Oh, Ted, talk about this one.
take. Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. This thing, folds over. And the idea was for her, was to form this pattern, irregular color, but a consistent structure. And then where does she go with it? She starts bouncing things around. I guess, here. These are falling into place, These are falling into place. And here is the last one. And Then there's this compression that takes place with these two bars. And then there's the beginning of resistance to that, an explosion, so to speak. And then here are the squawking birds, but they're aligned nicely as a reference back to the beginning.
What's
Yeah.
the last one, Ted? I didn't see the
Oh.
last one. Oh, yes.
So it's squawking birds, but they're all aligned, just like the dots were in the beginning. The eggs. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you handle this one, do be real careful. The others, it could be more casual. Okay. All right.
Anybody have any questions right here, so that we can talk about what's here, and then, or we can move back to the seats and field questions about anything. I do want to encourage you, because Ted had to talk about the liturgical panels without them being there in front of you. They're not that hard to move, but they're hard enough to move. They're taller than most doorways, things like that. So please take the time to walk up and down that hallway and look at them close and look at them at a distance. If you look at them close, you can see Ted's pencil lines and his, where his ideas started. And then, of course, at a distance, because that's how they're designed to be seen. So, do you have any questions about any of these pieces, or how Ted worked with his students?
I was very fortunate to make a career out of teaching day school, part-time, and night school.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else wanted to do the night sessions.
Right.
So I did the two, and it was wonderful.
How many different I know you taught at Wash U and you taught at Maryville.
Let's see.
Well, and you taught the night.
Oh, and the junior college.
Okay.
In
Forest Park?
No, Curtin and Kirkland.
Merrimack.
Merrimack.
Okay. St. Louis Community College, Merrimack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
okay, let's move back over to the chairs. About the physical, emotional, and mental influences, the things in his childhood and just in life that really impacted him. And one of the images that he talked about last week that really impressed me was his memory of walking barefoot on very dry, chalky ground. And all these years, this is as a child, and all these years that still holds very strong in his memory.
It was like talcum powder.
It was like talcum powder. And
I was on my way to a swimming hole, and I was barefooted, and my cousins were with me, and they went on, but I just kind of stayed there a while.
I just love it. So, and through the course of the show, we've seen his interest in humanity through these portraits of his heroes, so to speak, or notable individuals that really caused him to stop and contemplate and consider them, their life. We've seen his work with students in his graphic design work, his liturgical artwork for this body of believers, including a few that have not ever been executed full-size in panels and so forth. So at this point, we can field any questions. While you all are kind of pulling together a question or a comment, comments are welcome too. I'd like Ted to clarify the flowers. El Presidente is holding flowers.
Yeah, well, it's somewhat stretching. He was going into enemy territory, but his goal was peace, and so that I felt was an appropriate symbol of an offering. Yeah.
Interesting. And you chose to use color in the flowers and a few other little details, and color in the Bonhoeffer image, but no color in Berryman, and actually no color in the others. So, tell me about that, if you can.
Okay.
Sometimes,
I doubt if I can. I think,
okay,
yeah, I wouldn't say that, no, I wouldn't say that there was any particular reason for that.
it just seemed right in those and
At the
and
spur of the moment.
unnecessary
At
others.
the spur of the moment,
Uh-huh,
yeah.
uh-huh, okay. So, questions? Anybody? Comments? Memories of working with Ted?
I wasn't here for most of this, we got caught in traffic.
Amen.
Marathon, but,
Oh,
so
right.
forgive me if this is a repeat question, but I look at the prints, you know, the graphic stuff here, it's very, very clean, I guess, for lack of a better word, very, deliberate, and then I look over here at these three, and you have kind of there's a precision there, but, a roughness,
Yeah.
a great roughness.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how, with what ease did you go back and forth with these styles?
I think that's probably rooted in the exhibit that I mentioned earlier on, that Gladys was hanging on the wall, where the guy was a wonderful painter, but, he painted with a knife, you could tell,
Cool.
okay? So
Yeah.
that would be, in a way, comparable to the roughness of it. And then he was a wonderful graphic designer and cartoonist, for Pete's sake. I know you remember Gerald McBoing,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
where were they made, in Canada?
Yeah, it's animation.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
animated cartoons. There's not very many of them.
and,
But,
and the Pink Panther.
Right, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so he had things that were of that quality.
Yeah.
And-
Minimalist.
Yeah,
kind of,
right.
Animation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very simple, right?
And that's, I guess, more in the realm of this sort of thing?
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about it last week, because it is very apparent. There's a lot of very clean lines and very careful decisions, very careful placement, and a lot of the graphic work and a lot of the liturgical design work too. So it's very clear about the training as a graphic designer. And Ted talked a little bit about the first time he watched a graphic designer actually nudge and move different elements around very carefully with the tip of his X-Acto knife. Move it an eighth of an inch that way, and say, nope, move it an eighth of an inch back. Things like that. So we talked a little bit about that, and this was an exploration and kind of an emotional. How do you capture the life of someone significant? And it didn't seem to Ted at the time, obviously, that to do a very clean, clear graphic rendering was going to capture the emotion. And each of these characters have a load of emotional context for Ted personally. And so they made some mark on him, either as poets, the image of Gladys, Walker Percy, as a writer, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a writer, and in many of them too, there's a connection to personal sacrifice, whether it was the work that they felt called to do. Gladys giving over painting to being a mother and a grandmother, and on, and Bonhoeffer giving up his life. El Presidente putting his life on the line for the sake of his people. And then these two poets who both felt so conflicted in their lives that they ultimately took their own lives, seeing that as a logical step in how they understood themselves in their lives, not something that was done on a whim, kind of thing. So I think these were all persons that impacted Ted, and he wanted to convey that. He wanted to convey the emotional quality. So, am I reaching?
Yes, you.
I'm right, but I'm reaching? I'm okay? So, but I think as someone that designs exhibitions, I think it makes this exhibition really rich, because it truly is a retrospective. We are seeing, you know, the work that is the passion of his heart, we've seen the work that's the passion of his mind, his understanding of graphic design and the placement of elements is a God-given gift, and his love of the written word. So all these images and broadsides is what a image of with a poem printed on it is referred to as a broadside. So, Peter.
I think we're all carried away from these two sessions listening to you, Ted. Oh, those wonderful stories of your childhood. The dust that felt like talcum powder, the sensation. Lying on your back, looking at the blue sky, and then being terrified. Playing with the other Smith boys, Dan and Phil. The time you had with them, and I'm struck by your perception at the time, and also that you remember that these episodes have stayed with you. They're wonderful to listen to.
Yeah, this oil painting back here?
Really?
Acrylic.
The little one back there.
Yeah, we haven't really heard anything about that.
Oh, I guess there's not too much to say about it.
But it's lovely, so we're going to make you say something.
Just, was it like a study, or just?
Yeah. Who was I looking at when I did that? I've forgotten who it was, but
I bet my mind's getting old, Ted. I could tell you, but I can't remember his name right now. But did a number of still lifes with vessels and vases lined up, very pristinely, beautifully painted, perfect lighting.
yeah.
Maybe his name will come to me. But tell us about the objects you chose.
Well, the orange, the ceramic vase, I guess, bottle, and a glass bottle, and then a spoon. I'm kind of proud of that spoon.
Yes.
Okay, and then the other element is a cricket cage, Japanese cricket cage. And, well, you can see how I attempted to, relate this background to the cloth down here simply by its position. And I don't know, I think that's about all I have to say.
Yeah, some wonderful shadows, I was just going to say. Very observant, different tonality in the shadow from here to here to here. Creating a shadow on a ceramic surface means that shadow also has to be a little modeled, because the ceramic surface is not a perfect, pristine, smooth surface. So he captured that very nicely. In a similar way that the surface of an orange is not a smooth, shiny, clear surface, so you have a bit of a modeled quality to creating the volume as well as then creating the shadows. And the spoon is pristine, and it's kind of snuck in there. You almost don't see it when you first look at the piece, because you see the shapes. You see the rectangles, the circles, the vessels. And then here, near the middle of the canvas, with this green bottle, which reflects the green otherwise, and a little bit of greenness here, all of a sudden you think, what is this? And then you see this beautifully rendered spoon with just enough shadow to set it off. So it's just a really lovely little still life. And this was done in the 80s, about the same time as these big renderings were done.
Yeah. Right.
So this is not a situation where we're looking at, a still life he did as a student when he was still trying to find his way, so to speak, figure out what he was going to do. This is actually a mature artist saying, I think I want to pursue this kind of a classic approach. I want to look at a still life. I want to see if I can master rendering a still life in paint.
But the graphic design took over.
Yeah. So, but Very lovely little piece, so. It's about time, I'm being told. Okay, so there are some printed out copies of the show list on the little pedestal out here. Hopefully by next week we'll have some with a color cover on them. So we printed a lot, like, oh, I don't know, over 50 of them, and they all just left. Everybody liked them so much they took them with them, which we knew they were going to do. We just thought we'd have a few more left over. So, and then the show will be up through November 6th. So take time to come in, look again, bring other friends, members, anybody in. You can always call the church and find out when the building would be open, that someone could let you in with a friend or a colleague to show them the exhibition. This isn't by no means intended to be a gallery just for Grace and Peace. We would love it to be bustling with people looking at art all the time and coming to Jim's film things. So we have a lot of stuff kind of going on, and it's all wildly chaotic at this moment, but headed towards some sense of order. So yeah, and do check out last week's video on the website, on the Grace and Peace website.